Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
I want to welcome a new guest to the show, Tess Fyalka from Springfield, Illinois, home of Abraham Lincoln. And we were just visiting about that wonderful little city that you live in, and I've visited a number of times. And you're the author of Walking the Leadership Ledge. And I want to talk to you about that, Tess. I want to tell you a little bit about you, obviously, so people know who you are that aren't aware of you. 20 plus years in leadership, guidance, coaching. And let's just start talking about coaching. Why, and we were talking about this off camera, why do people need a coach?
That's such a great question, John. And the coach is the guide on the side, right? As we're trying to navigate all of the stuff that is thrown at us, and especially leaders find themselves in leadership positions. And all of a sudden, it's a completely different set of competencies. And so, how do they navigate that? They usually navigate it by leaning into what they did before that worked for them in their previous role, and in oftentimes that's an individual contributor role. And so now all of a sudden they find themselves in leadership and don't have a playbook. And so a leadership development coach in particular really helps the existing or the emerging leader or the new leader. You decide what new is, because we're new leaders throughout our careers as we go into new positions. But the coach really helps the leader to identify what are the competencies that they need to develop as a leader. Where are they now? What do they need to develop? And the coach then helps guide them, helps them to set forth on that journey and develop those skills and develop those competencies. And the coach helps them to think about things that maybe they haven't even ever thought about. Things like, what do I value as a leader? And what am I really here to achieve as a leader? What's my vision? How do I get my team members on board? What does that look like? How do I develop them? Because as a leader, not only do I need to get work done through others, part of my job is to develop other leaders and to scale my capacity as I'm helping them to scale theirs. So it's a long answer to your question, but that gets probably at the heart of what makes me passionate about coaching and leadership development.
I've never met, and I've met a lot of world class and professional athletes, world class and professional business leaders. And I've never met one yet that didn't have a coach or believe in coaching. So sometimes to think that we can do it all by ourselves because we're going to master every single thing, it's naive, especially today where technology is something in itself. Whether you look at a platform, whether you look and say, I want to market on Shopify, there's people that are experts in that. I want to market on TikTok, there's people who are experts in that. I'll just do it all. That's great, but somebody knows how to do it. Why not let them coach you and avoid all of the mistakes that they've probably already made? Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%, John. Where's your zone of genius? Is your zone of genius in figuring out TikTok and Shopify and this, that, or the other thing? Or is your zone of genius in creating content or actually having FaceTime with your clients where you can have real impact?
Exactly. I love it because
Absolutely.
I think too, what you're doing too, it helps people to shine where they can shine and to eliminate the minutia that maybe they can have somebody else do in the organization so they do what they do best. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, one of the challenges is that not only do we think we can do it all, it's out of ego, but we think we have to do it all, as opposed to say, wait a minute, if I'm really good at selling, why am I managing? And if I'm really good at managing, why am I selling? And if I'm really good at whatever, why don't I do what I'm really good at? So
Yeah. Yeah, and understandably for entrepreneurs, that can be particularly challenging, right? Because they feel like they've got to get to an income threshold. So there's that piece of it that is probably also gnawing on them as well. As okay, am I financially in a position where I should be investing in this?
We were talking off camera a little bit about the three P's that Marcus Lemonis talks about, right? People, process, product. And we've all seen great products that you go, wow, this is a great product. How come it's not selling? Or we've seen great companies that maybe even have a really good process, but they're deficient maybe on product, but they can get over that. But the one thing I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I know the answer to this, is that other P. The people are irreplaceable in an organization. And I think you help those people to grow. Talk about how you do that and some of the things that people can do within these organizations to better themselves.
Mhm. And you hit on it. Organizations are made up of people. Until we're all replaced by AI, work gets done through people. And so, how are you developing your people? How are you enabling them so that they can step up and they can deliver on the vision that you're casting? You can see what's possible. And how are you instilling that in them as a leader? So, in my work with leaders, as I mentioned earlier, it's very much about how are you developing those competencies as a leader. And part of that, one of the critical pieces of the pie is how are you developing your team members? And fundamental things, John, that eh, to you and I, you and me, it's okay, it seems very obvious, things like setting forth clear expectations. And yet, I was just in a conversation yesterday with a leader who's very frustrated with a direct report. And when we talked about, okay, explaining what does good look like, if they're really delivering on what you expect, what does good look like beyond the job description? Because the job description is, those are usually very vague. And they say things like timely response or a thorough review. And what do those things mean? And so when we're trying to set up our team members, set up our people to succeed, that clarity around what are the expectations, but what does good look like? What does success look like? And the ways in which we as leaders are helping our team members to deliver on the vision that we're actually trying to create, that as that becomes manifest in the day-to-day operations of the organization, and being able to take that vision and make it real for the team members. How do they matter to the success of the organization? How do they matter to the impact that you're having on your community and to the clients and the customers that you serve? So those connecting the team members to what does success look like, and what's the bigger piece of this, the bigger impact that you are having, and how am I equipping you so that you can deliver on that? How am I having regular conversations with you so that when we're not in this situation, and this is another sort of side note, so many folks that I work with are terrified of the difficult conversation. And yet, if we create a culture of communication, if we create a culture of a conversation, and we have the tools to do that, the difficult conversations are, they're not these foreboding things to be afraid of, because we're having ongoing dialogue all the time. And it's not about you, John. It's not about me, Tess. It's about what are we here together to achieve in service to our clients and our customers. And we're excited about that. And we're having ongoing conversations about what that looks like. Another long answer to your question. Not sure if I answered it or
You
not.
know, along those
Mhm.
lines, it brings up another question. I promise you no curveballs, but I'm always going to throw in one or two here
That's
without
right.
meaning to.
Mhm.
So we're just having a conversation. That's all the podcast really is.
Mhm.
But let me
Mhm.
give you one, okay? Like Uber, for example, they eliminated the walls in their business. Everything when you walk into their offices in San Francisco are transparent. If you're a secretary, you see the CEO in his office and he sees the accounting department, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they were the first company that did that. I don't know that for a fact. So if somebody wants to correct me, feel free. But the first one that famously did it anyway, where they advertised, hey, the CEO is not hiding behind the doors. He's you want to go talk to him, there he is. I thought that was a wise decision by them, by the way. And using them as an example, I was watching a show on CNBC a couple of weeks back, and the interviewer asked the current CEO of Uber, not the original guy, not the founder, the current fellow, what he figured out when he took over the company. He took over during COVID. Not great timing to take over anything, right? And what he did was real smart. He said, you know what? I don't know this business. I know business. I don't know this business. And he went out and he actually leased a Tesla, and he went out and he picked up clients. Now, he didn't tell them, hey, by the way, I'm the CEO of the company that I'm driving you for. They just thought he was a guy. And boy, what did he learn listening to his customers? So, in this day and age, where on the one hand, there's great transparency, Uber, and I know one of the companies I work with in Houston, they've got the same thing. Okay, same thing. Everybody can see each other. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, quite honestly, but let's assume it is for a minute. I don't work in corporate America, so I don't experience that one way or another, so I can't comment on that, but I think it's a good idea. But along that line, how do we make sure that person who's in senior leadership, CEO, CMO, CFO, COO, that individual, that he or she recognizes that people who that person who's down the food chain a little bit, not making 7-figure incomes or making a 6-figure income or even a 5-figure income, but they want to feel two things. I think number one, they want to feel heard. How do they feel heard? And then I'll ask a second question on it.
First of all, your point about the transparencies and in the office and great that they don't have the walls or whatever. That's great if indeed there truly is communication and connection. That can look really nice. It can look like, yes, it's very open, but it all comes down to, are the senior leaders actually engaging with the folks on the front line? Because 80% of the strategy gets done at the front line. And so, how are the senior leaders connecting? And actually, and truly, you can have the coffees and you can do the engagement surveys and those kinds of things. But if you are engaging in conversation, but not taking action, that it's hollow. It's clear that you're putting forth a nice face. And yes, you're demonstrating that you are communicating with the folks who are actually on the front lines and doing the work. But yet there's no follow through on the other side to actually implement any of the suggestions that you may be hearing. And so then, of course, you lose credibility and it becomes the flavor of the month, right? Whereas, oh, yeah, we're going to do this now. And the leader's going to have coffees, or now we have all of these glass windows to signify our transparency. But it's all in how you show up as the leader. How do you truly engage?
Second question on that. The Old Testament thing that Solomon said something, and I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'll probably get a note on this one too, but accurate communication allows progress. How do we, as a second in command, a third in command, a fifth in command in an organization, most of the time in corporate America, but maybe even in small business, how do we get that accurate communication like you just talked about, right? So the CEO says, hey, we're going to have coffee together every Friday morning as a team. That's great. That's a good place to start. Better than not doing that, right? But how do he or she really get that communication from that person that says, hey, we keep showing this? Let's use a simple example. We keep showing this brochure and our customers hate it. But if you changed it from blue to green, I think they'd like it. And I'm simplifying it. Whatever example you want to use. How do we get that accurate communication? So the CEO doesn't say, wow, every time I see this person, all I have is a complaint or a suggestion, as opposed to this person is actually thinking for the team. How to make the sales process better, how to make the marketing process better, how to make the image of the company better, whatever it happens to be based on the business. How does that person communicate that so they don't become in that upper person's mind a pest, as opposed to they really have good suggestions?
So let me get clarity on your question, John. Are you asking how the mid-level managers, if you will, communicate with the upper management
Exactly.
so that, okay, got you. Okay, all right. So I would be interested in, as the mid-level manager, this is a key stakeholder. And it's like anybody else that's a key stakeholder in that, how do they want to receive their information? And so being a student of your leader, and how do they tend to communicate? And if you're paying attention to how they communicate, oftentimes that is how they want to receive information. And so tuning into that and also asking them, how would you like me to communicate this information to you? What's most productive for you?
Okay. So here's another one. So as a new leader, I mentioned a company. We won't use a specific company because, and this pertains probably to a lot of companies because companies go through this, right? Especially successful companies, I should say, go through this because successful companies, founders start businesses, founders are human, they die eventually or they retire. And I used an example with you earlier of a company where the founder died. And that particular company brought in a very seasoned, very professional executive to replace him. But that particular guy, even though he had been super successful in another business, had no experience in this particular business driven by all 1099 contractors. And the first couple of years, the guy had a real hard time. And once he stopped listening to the MBAs and he started listening to Salesforce, he turned it around. And that particular company today is very successful. But along the line, here's a question. And this could be a small business in Springfield, Illinois. This could be a small insurance agency. This could be a small realtor. This could be a small car dealer. This could be a large business in Chicago, right? Doesn't really matter. It's the same question. The person coming in the door that's tasked with the next level of growing a company, sustaining, first of all, right? Putting out some fires, maybe growing that company, because most people are hired to grow something, not to maintain it. How should that person conduct themselves in terms of communication, in terms of getting a feel for the organization, so they don't just come in and say, hey, at ABC company, we did it like this, we're going to do it that way over here. And these people that are over here for 20 years say, no, and they reject them instead of embracing them. How does that person do that successfully in your experience so that once again they get people to at least say, hey, let's give the guy a chance or let's give this woman a chance? Best ways.
Yeah. Yeah. John, I think most importantly for any of us in any new position is that we are seeking first to understand and what is happening out there for the folks who are on the front line, who are the folks who are selling the product or meeting with the customers, and what are they experiencing, and walking in with a recognition of, I don't have all the answers. And most people don't respond well, regardless of whether you're the emerging leader and you're suddenly put into management, or whether you're an executive walking into an executive leadership position. The folks on the rank and file want to know that you want to understand what are the challenges that they're facing, what is the expertise that they bring, how might you engage their knowledge and their experience as you're shaping the next iteration of the organization in service to the clients that you're all here hoping to not just deliver the product for, but to wow.
Great. Your team alignment pact, how would that help to facilitate and make that transition maybe a little bit easier for that individual?
Yes. So the team alignment pact. So first of all, I like the word pact because it is rooted in peace. And pretty much every team that I've ever worked with could use a little bit more peace on the team. The thing with the pact is that it really is about, it focuses on how are we going to work most effectively together as a team. And fundamentally, and this is when we're to the point where we know what our why is, we know what our purpose is, we know what our strategic objectives are that we're going after, but we have to be able to work effectively as a team. And so my joke is that organizations throw people together, and it's, if you have played on a team, if you've cheered for your favorite Super Bowl team, your favorite baseball team, if you cheered your kids on and their team sports, by golly, if you can spell the word team, you know how to be a team player. And in fact, that doesn't happen. And we see that. I think I've seen the statistics as high as 60 to 90% of teams fail in meeting their objectives. And that's a wide span there. But the bottom line is that so many teams do not achieve what they set out to achieve. And so with the team pact, getting back to that, it is really about this idea of how do we set up the structure for how we are going to work most effectively together. And there's a process that I take teams through where everyone has pretty much worked on a dysfunctional team. And so you can pretty quickly identify, yes, what dysfunction looks like and what you don't want. And then we talk about what do you want on a team? What does a high functioning team look like? And what are the characteristics of that high functioning team? Now, fundamentally, going through the process, pretty much every team wants four core things. They want communication, they want trust, they want accountability, and they want respect. Now, but here's the thing, each team member has a different interpretation of what communication looks like, what trust looks like, what respect looks like. And yeah, they want those things, but what does communication look like to John? What does respect look like to Tess? What does accountability look like to Joe? And we get into what does this look like in action? If you're truly being accountable on the team, what does that look like? And the team agrees to what those behaviors look like and how each team member is showing up. And then and then what happens, because we are all human beings, what happens when dysfunction does take over? And what does that look like for John when you're hijacked and you're not showing up at your best? And how is that impacting the team? And what do you need from your team members to help pull you to the other side of that? It's okay, I'm stonewalling here, I'm shutting down, or I'm becoming hypercritical. And the team knows what to look for. They know that, okay, John's in a tough place right now. How do we help him get to the other side of that? And it's all of these things in the agreement that spell out how you guys are going to work most effectively together, what you're going to see when on those tough days, and how you help each other get past that. And also, there's the checking in on the pact at least once a month, where you're looking at, okay, these are our agreements. This is what we said it was going to look like. Where are we crushing it? And things are going really good and we're nailing it, knocking it out of the park. And where are we struggling? And what do we need? What do we need to tease out? What's underneath that? What's going on here? So that do we need to make some adjustments in what we're expecting of one another? And that just really helps to get clarity around it's beyond the Tuckman model, it's beyond forming, storming, norming, and performing. That's great. But we really got to talk about what do our actions and behaviors look like in action? And how do we most effectively set ourselves and each other up so that we really can be a team, so that I can toss the ball to you and you will catch it. And we know what that looks like.
When do you take a group like that in a corporate setting, let's say, right, of X amount of individuals, and then say, okay, let's set focus groups for whatever it happens to be. Let's take the marketing guys on a marketing issue, the sales guys on a sales issue, the accounting guys on the accounting issue, the legal guys on the legal issue. And then do you bring them back together after they do that? So you make sure that you don't have compliance issues or regulatory issues. Like, in other words, how do you delegate so that you've got the proverbial, my favorite expression, right? Square pegs going to square holes. So you don't have John, the sales guy, sitting in the accounting meeting and Joe, the accountant, sitting in the marketing meeting, because that might not be the best use of their experiences. And yet at the same time, from a team standpoint, when you go out to the marketplace, because of all the factors from regulatory, legal, et cetera, that you go to marketplace so that you've got a clean product or a clean service so that you don't run afoul of the law and have issues with that, so that you can go to the marketplace with a very clean, if you will, clean sheet of ice, okay, so to speak, to go out and operate and grow that particular brand or business.
Now, John, when I'm working with the team and we're creating a team pact and we're trying to align the team, what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to set up an environment where, if the person who is responsible for the accounting portion of it is on that team, and you've got legal and they're on that team, and you've got operations and whatnot, this is really a cross-functional team, let's say. We want to create an environment where we can respectfully challenge each other, where we can engage in dialogue around where our disagreements are. And because in this pact we have said that, okay, if communication is really important, then we've got to be able to wrestle these tough issues to the ground, and we've got to create an environment where there's enough psychological safety where, all right, so the person in legal is not going to back down when operations is raising concerns about or marketing is raising concerns about, we got to get this product to market. We have to create an environment where those debates and those challenges can take place, and that's really the intention of the team pact, is so that the team can function through dysfunction, if you will. It's like we can wrestle with the nitty gritty, difficult stuff because we have agreed this is how we're going to work most effectively together. And I don't know if I answered your question, but that's really the intention of the team pact.
And do you find too that, let's go back, another guy with some Illinois roots, right? Ronald Reagan, one of my personal heroes, by the way. But Reagan always said, I don't care who gets the credit. And let me give you two examples. I love your thought on this because you work with so many different groups. Reagan's philosophy was, I don't care who gets the credit for something. I just care we get it right, because that's what the American people are expecting us to do. Whether you were a Democrat, a Republican, whatever, it didn't really matter. It was like, let's get it right, because that's what those people that pay our salaries are expecting us to do. And in business, I think it's the same thing. Our shareholders, our investors, they expect us to get it right. They don't care where it comes from. And Ray Kroc, also another Illinois person, I think, he had some roots there too. But Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, he had a thing that was interesting where, when I read his book, and I may not get this right, but it was a thing where basically they gave a scholarship to somebody with a good idea that the company implemented. And at one time, McDonald's used to throw out the hamburger rolls at night. It was like, okay, shift's over, they throw them in the trash. And this young man basically said, I'm going to start bringing these home and putting an egg on them in the morning. And he started making egg sandwiches. And he wrote Ray Kroc a letter. And Ray Kroc said, yeah, why aren't we in the breakfast business? Why aren't we reusing that bread and throw an egg on it? And there you go. And they only launched a gazillion-dollar business. And I don't know whatever happened to the young man, but I think he got a $25,000 scholarship. But here's my point. Whether it was Reagan, whether it was Kroc, right, or any other person in a leadership position, how do they divorce themselves from that word that many of us struggle with, ego? If it's not invented here, if John didn't think of it, it can't be a good idea. How does that person divorce themselves from ego and say, wait a minute, that person's got a good idea. Maybe I don't even like that person, but they had the right solution. So therefore we need to implement, or at least really examine that solution to our problem. How does a leader do that in the best manner?
Awareness. Leadership is all about self-awareness, and again, it's like, what am I trying to achieve as a leader? What are we here to do? What's the impact we're trying to have? And it's understanding our purpose and our why, and yes, great, there's the healthy side of the ego, but is the ego getting in the way of your team members being able to step up? Because you've always got to have the last word. You're the one who has to be right. You're shutting people down, or you're not allowing someone to explain their perspective. And so, I'd love to tell you, oh, here's the magic formula, right? Here's your 5-step plan. That would be great. But we all know there are no such things as 5-step plans that actually get us to across the finish line. But self-awareness is the number one attribute that a highly effective leader needs to cultivate in my opinion, they want to have true and lasting impact. And I'm sure that many coaches that you've had on your show have spoken to this, but that recognition around what are my triggers? What am I holding on to? And how am I showing up with my team? And what am I doing to actually get feedback from my team? Or am I holding on so tightly to I'm the leader and I tell you what to do. I'm the smartest person in the room that I won't even allow the door to be cracked open this much to get a sense of how are others experiencing me.
Great, great. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of things, Tess. Okay, in terms of delegation. When does somebody delegate and just say, okay, look, you know what? You're obviously the right person for the job, or you're the right person for this facet of the business. When do they delegate and just make that decision? And maybe somebody else thinks that they were the right person, but when does that new person, that new leader in an organization just say, hey, I got to make some decisions. We got to move forward. We've talked enough. Now we got to go into action, right? When do they make that decision? And are there some tools that they can use to make that decision properly when they evaluate whoever that individual is for that role that they're going to delegate?
Yeah. And that is such a struggle for new leaders to recognize that, okay, it's time for me. I'm trying to take on so much. And again, that self awareness around, okay, so is my tendency to swoop in and control? Is my tendency to try to take care of everyone because I don't want them to have to do this hard thing? And that recognition of what do I tend to do, especially under stress, when I feel like I need to be having all the answers or that I need to be swooping in and taking control? Am I maxing out? Am I facing burnout? And my team members are waiting for me to give them instruction and they're not thinking for themselves, they're not engaging in critical thinking, they're not offering their perspectives, just that paying attention to what am I seeing on my team and how am I not using my people and how am I then I'm not scaling my capacity. All right, so I've moved into a leadership position and so my boss is expecting me to be thinking more strategically, but I'm actually over here doing what I did before as an individual contributor because I'm holding on so tightly to it because I know the way it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be done this way. So that the first step is this recognition of I can't get done what I really need to be doing in this position because I am either swooping in and taking over or I'm the one with all the answers. Everyone is coming to me for instruction for what they should be doing next. And I tell a story in the book about a leader she was a manager, but then she was placed in a higher level, more strategic position. And she went on vacation and she came back and she realized that all of her team members were working on these lower level tasks and they had some critical deadlines that were facing them. But her team members were so used to going to her for instructions on what they should be doing next that when she was gone, they were afraid to make a decision to take ownership for these more important tasks. So a lot there going on in terms of trying to answer your question around when is the right time. You're probably overwhelmed. You're not delivering on what your leader is expected of you. And you're probably finding that your team members are needing way too much instruction from you. So then that the looking at, all right, what are the things that only you as a leader can do in this position where truly no one else on your team can do it? And then trying to peel off what are those things that someone else truly can be getting done. And as you're looking at your team members and you're trying to scale your capacity and you're developing them, I like to think of it as a way of engagement. When you're developing them, you're engaging them and you're helping to build their capacity. So then they're learning and they're growing, and when they're taking on that responsibility, once again, you're scaling your capacity so that you can focus on the bigger issues, the more strategic things that need your attention and your focus. So identifying what are those things that only you can do, what can you get off your plate, and then who are the team members who, Yeah, in an ideal world, you're giving the highly detailed projects to the highly detailed person. That's wonderful when that works in an ideal world, but you don't necessarily have that. And so what it they mean you might have to give that project to this particular person because it's part of their growth and development. And maybe today they're not going to do it as well as you did. Of course not. And but as you're coaching them and you're showing them back at as we started at the beginning, what does success look like? What does good look like? And how can you as a leader create the feedback loops for you as well, where you're checking in with them and they're checking in with you, whatever that looks like. And so maybe they're giving you the first draft and so that or the second draft, and then you're going to fine tune it from there. And you're giving them an example of what it is that the general framework for what it is you want this to look like, this finished product, but you're not just handing it off and expecting that it's going to come back to you the way that you do it, but you're coaching the individual along the way as they're learning your style of how you want it done.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Let me give you an example of something, and I'd love for you to take that, and for the new person that is in that position of leadership. So I interviewed a guy who used to work for Jack Welch. And he shared a very interesting story that Jack Welch was in a board meeting, right, with all these CEOs and everything sitting on the board of General Electric. And I can only imagine who was sitting there. And he said, "Guys, I got to stop the meeting for 5 minutes." And they're like, "Why?" He said, "I need to make a phone call." And he called one of the leaders in his company who ran a division. And I don't know exactly what they had bought, but whatever they had bought, they had basically negotiated to save about 5 cents per unit. But it's General Electric. So how many units? Millions of units. So they saved the company a bunch of money. He said, "I want to call to congratulate this individual. I need 5 minutes, guys, right now, because I know the guy's at his desk. And I know they told this guy prior, Jack's going to call you, have your team around." And Jack Welch called the guy, congratulated him, everybody applauded, and then everybody went back to their day. So that's a great example of maybe the greatest CEO in history. But how does that person, that normal person, they walk into that business, they're going to run it. Maybe they're a stranger, they've been hired from an agency. Okay. Now, or maybe they even grew up in that organization and they've been elevated because of death, because of retirement, because of whatever. How does a person take something like what Welch did and utilize that same philosophy so that people go, wow, this person really, not only do they have a handle on what's going on in the business, which is really important, but also they're here to encourage. They want us to win. They want us to succeed in our role. Is there a tool maybe or an idea or a strategy that they can utilize to do something like that?
Jack Welch, he takes 5 minutes and he is acknowledging the great work of this particular individual. All right. So you speak to one of the most important aspects of leadership and showing appreciation for your team members. And if you can, on a regular basis, be intentional about showing appreciation, people will walk through fire for you if they know you care. And there is a great example that I believe it's the Center for Creative Leadership. A recommendation that they give leaders, and it's the three dimes principle. And if you're walking around, if you're in the office and you have three dimes in your pocket, and that is a reminder to acknowledge three people every single day for the work that they've done or that they're doing, whatever that is. And it's specific. Mary, the way you handled that conversation with Mrs. Smith, your care and your compassion, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for your commitment to delivering excellent customer service every single day. It takes less than 30 seconds to acknowledge someone's contribution and to remind them that their work matters in delivering what the organization is there to deliver. It matters to the organizational purpose.
I never heard of it. It's called the three dimes.
Three dimes, yes.
Love it. Wow. That is I'm going to start doing that. That's key. Tess, walking the leadership ledge, where do they get it? And how can they get in contact with you if they desire to bring you in and help their organization or help them as an individual, perhaps to get to the next level or work within the framework of something that they've been elevated to do that they're saying, oh my God, I'm stressed out about this. How in the world am I going to do this? Where can I reach you?
So you can reach me at anglecoaching.com. That's ANGLE coaching.com, or Tess at anglecoaching.com. And also, there's my book website, walkingtheleadershipledge.com. And you can find my book on Amazon. It's available in print and in Kindle edition, and also just came out in Audible.
Great. Congratulations on the book and congratulations. And we got to do this again because there's so many different things that we could get into and so many different, as you see, in so many different directions we can go. But I love what you're doing and you're helping people to achieve. And I don't think there's anything better on earth than we can do to help another individual to achieve. So thank you for being you and thank you for doing that.
My pleasure, John. It's been a joy.
Thanks.